They are mothers, daughters, neighbors, faces you might pass in the grocery store. But these 5 women share something far darker in common. They are all black women sentenced to die by the state. In a country with over 2,300 people on death row, only a handful are women. Even fewer are black. And their stories are often buried beneath headlines dominated by male killers. Today, we shine a light on the lives, crimes, and final words of these women. Behind each case lies trauma, controversy, and decisions that led to a deadly fate. Some remain defiant, others repentant, but all are caught in the slow, chilling machinery of American capital punishment. This isn't just a list, this is a reckoning, a journey through some of the most haunting, painful, and complicated cases in U.S. death row history. Let's begin. Antoinette Frank, New Orleans, 1995.
Louisiana Pardon Board refuses a new clemency hearing for death row inmate Antoinette Frank.
The city was still reeling from the scars of crime and corruption when it was shaken by one of its most shocking betrayals. Surprisingly, this time, it was a police officer turned killer. Her name, Antoinette Frank, a woman who once swore to protect and serve, but instead orchestrated bloodshed inside a Vietnamese restaurant on a rainy March night. Antoinette Frank was born in 1971, and from a young age, she longed to be a police officer. She joined the New Orleans Police Department despite failing multiple psychological evaluations. Many wonder to this day how the academy ignored a red flag like this. Colleagues described her as erratic and unstable. But what no one saw coming was that she would use her badge to facilitate murder. On the night of March 4, 1995, Frank and her then-boyfriend Rogers Lacaze, a 19-year-old drug dealer, walked into Kim restaurant, a local family-owned spot where she often worked off-duty security. But this time, she wasn't there for lunch break, nor was she there to guard. She was there to kill. Together, they executed a brutal robbery. In cold blood, they shot and killed New Orleans police officer Ronald A. Williams II, who was working that night, along with 2 siblings of the restaurant owners, Ha and Quang Vu. One family member managed to hide in a cooler and survive, later becoming the key eyewitness in the trial. What made the crime so chilling wasn't just the betrayal of trust, it was how calculated Frank was. You see, after helping commit the murders, she returned to the scene, pretending to be the responding officer to deflect suspicion. But her lies quickly unraveled. The trial was swift and unforgiving. Evidence showed that Frank had stolen a weapon from the police department's evidence room and used her authority to move around undetected. Her physical outlook in court was described as cold and indifferent. In 1995, she was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death.
I think that it's just, a terrible injustice to the victims and their families who have been waiting to see the state keep its promise. If we are going to have a death penalty, then we should be able to carry it out.
As of now, Antoinette Frank remains on Louisiana's death row, the only woman in the state awaiting execution. She has, however, shown little remorse. In her final plea for clemency in 2023, she was denied, a final nail in a decades-long legal battle. Her badge once meant protection. In the end, it became her disguise. But what happens when the murderer isn't an officer, but a caregiver? And when the victim is one of the most vulnerable people in society? Continue watching. Carlette Parker, North Carolina, 1998. It was a crime that left an entire community stunned. It wasn't just because of its brutality, but because of who committed it. Carlette Parker, a home health aide, was supposed to care for the elderly. Instead, she preyed on them. And one life in particular made her criminal activities. That of 86-year-old Alice Covington came to a tragic, watery end. Parker, then in her early 30s, had a long history of petty crime and theft, but nothing prepared anyone for what she would do on May 12, 1998. Parker had recently been fired from a caregiving job due to misconduct. But on that day, she approached Covington, a frail and trusting woman, and offered her a ride. Covington accepted. She had no idea this would be her last journey. Instead of taking her home, Parker drove to a remote location, forced Covington out of the car, and drowned her in a nearby creek. Afterwards, She took the elderly woman's bank cards and made multiple withdrawals of about $40,000 from ATMs across the city. Covington's body was later found floating, showing no signs of a natural death. The crime shocked the community, as many called for justice over her death. Parker tried to cover her tracks, denying involvement until surveillance footage from a bank ATM showed her using the victim's card. Parker drowned Covington after Covington discovered that Parker was stealing money from her. According to WRAL, once arrested, the truth unraveled. During her trial, prosecutors described her as manipulative, heartless, and greedy. According to the court statements, she was a woman who viewed kindness as weakness and vulnerability as opportunity. Her defense team argued she was mentally ill and had suffered lifelong trauma and abuse. But the jury wasn't moved. In 1999, she was sentenced to death for first-degree murder, becoming one of only 2 women on North Carolina's death row. Since then, Parker has filed numerous appeals, claiming her confession was coerced and that her weight and race were unfairly used to portray her as predatory during the trial. Still, she remains on death row, largely invisible to the public eye but symbolizing a painful truth. Not all killers come with weapons drawn. Some come smiling, in scrubs. And while Parker used water to carry out her crime, our next case turned to a weapon far more brutal. She committed a foot, a fist, and unspeakable violence against a child. Patricia Blackman, Alabama, 1999. The phone call came just after 9 p.m. Patricia Blackman told 911 that her child had stopped breathing, that something was wrong. When emergency responders arrived at her home, what they found wasn't just a medical emergency. It was a crime scene drenched in horror. Domanque, her 2-year-old adopted daughter, lay lifeless on the floor. Her small body was covered in deep bruises, bite marks, and blunt force injuries, nearly 30 in all. The medical examiner would later testify that Domanque had been struck with such force, it left an imprint of a shoe on her chest. And this shoe print was consistent with Blackman's own sandal. Born in 1961, Patricia Blackman was 38 at the time of the murder. To the outside world, she was a hard-working woman who had taken in a child out of love. But investigators say that behind closed doors, Blackman became a violent and unpredictable force, and that Domanque bore the brunt of her rage. What triggered the fatal beating? No one can say for certain. But prosecutors argued that Blackman was overwhelmed, resentful, and incapable of caring for a child with special needs. On the night of May 31, 1999, that resentment boiled over into a deadly explosion of violence. After the beating, Blackman reportedly waited before calling 911, giving conflicting accounts to police once they arrived. During her trial, Blackman showed little emotion. Her defense team claimed she was innocent, that someone else may have harmed the child while she was out. But the forensic evidence told a different story. No signs of forced entry, no sign of another suspect, and injuries that had occurred over time. The jury took just hours to return a guilty verdict. In 2002, Patricia Blackman was sentenced to death for the capital murder of a child under the age of 14. She has remained on Alabama's death row ever since. She is one of only a few women, and the only black woman, facing execution in the state. To this day, Blackman maintains her innocence. Her appeals have been denied, and while no execution date has been set, her case continues to stir debate on corporal punishment, parental rage, and the limits of redemption. If Blackman's story raises questions about motherhood and violence, the next woman's case forces us to look at a different stage. This one attained international controversy, missing evidence, and claims of wrongful conviction. Next up, Linda Carty, Texas, 2001. It was a crime straight out of a nightmare. A young woman was tied up, suffocated with a plastic bag, and her newborn child was kidnapped and hidden in a nearby car. And at the center of it all was a former schoolteacher turned DEA informant. We are talking about Linda Carty. Born in St. Kitts and Nevis in 1958, Carty was a British national who came to the U.S. with dreams of becoming a teacher and raising a family. But behind her quiet smile was a history of deception, troubled relationships, and a desperate need for control. By the early 2000s, she was working as a DEA informant, often inserting herself into drug investigations. On May 16, 2001, 25-year-old Joanna Rodriguez was found dead in the trunk of a car. She had been kidnapped the night before along with her newborn son. The baby was later recovered alive, hidden in another vehicle. The investigation quickly led to Cardi and 3 men she allegedly recruited for the abduction. Prosecutors claimed Linda Cardi orchestrated the kidnapping to steal Joanna's baby and pass it off as her own. They argued that Cardi, who had recently suffered a miscarriage and was obsessed with keeping her common-law husband, concocted a plan straight out of a crime novel. During the trial, witnesses testified that she had pretended to be pregnant for months and was desperate to find a baby. But Cardi's case wasn't clear-cut. Her defense attorney failed to call crucial witnesses, including family and friends who could have supported her claims of innocence. Her British nationality wasn't properly disclosed during her arrest, a violation of international law, and the men who actually carried out the abduction received lighter sentences in exchange for testifying against her. In 2002, Cardi was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. She became the only British citizen on death row in the United States. Her case drew international outcry. Human rights organizations, British politicians, and celebrities like Bianca Jagger and Richard Branson have called for clemency, citing legal failures and a lack of evidence directly tying her to the murder. Linda Cardi remains on Texas death row to this day, still proclaiming her innocence. Her appeals continue, but the clock is ticking. And while her case is shrouded in questions and controversy, our final story takes us back to Houston, where one woman's rage turned a robbery into a bloodbath. Erica Shepard, Texas, 1993. She was just 19 years old, a teen mother, a high school dropout, and, according to prosecutors, a cold-blooded killer. Erica Shepard's life had been a tragic blend of abuse, poverty, and instability. But what happened on June 30th, 1993, would seal her fate forever. That morning, 43-year-old Marilyn Meir, a white woman, a mother and churchgoer, opened her home to help someone she thought was in need. Instead, she was ambushed, beaten, strangled with an electrical cord, and stabbed with a pair of scissors. The motive? Her car. Erica Shepard and her accomplice, James Dickerson, wanted a vehicle, and they were willing to kill for it. According to court records, the two had planned the robbery for days. After gaining entry to Meager's home, they overpowered her. Dickerson allegedly held Meager down while Shepard delivered the fatal blows. They then stuffed her body under a bed, took her wallet, and fled the scene in her car. The murder was brutal, senseless, and it rocked Houston. The stolen vehicle was quickly spotted, leading to the arrest of both suspects within days. Shepard confessed, though her defense team would later argue that she was manipulated by Dickerson and had only helped under duress. At trial, the courtroom was divided. The prosecution painted Shepard as a ruthless killer who participated willingly. The defense pointed to her history, a childhood filled with trauma, neglect, sexual abuse, and untreated mental health issues. They argued that she was a victim long before she ever became a perpetrator. But the jury saw little room for mercy. In 1995, Erica Shepard was sentenced to death, becoming one of the youngest women ever placed on Texas's death row. Over the years, her case has drawn renewed attention. Activists argue that her trial was tainted by inadequate counsel, racial bias, and a failure to consider her background. Multiple appeals have been filed, but all have been denied. She remains in the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas, the same prison that once housed Carla Faye Tucker. Shepard has since expressed deep remorse, telling interviewers that not a day goes by without her thinking of Marilyn Meager's family. Yet the justice system has shown little sign of reversing her fate, and so she waits for the governor's pen, for a higher court, or for that final call that brings her walk to the chamber. But what does it mean when the state chooses death? And what truths do these 5 cases reveal about race, gender, justice, and the American death penalty? This has been a look at every black woman currently on death row in the United States. Their lives, their crimes, their final words. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and stay with us for the next story, because there's always more to uncover. Let me know if you'd like this in a downloadable format, or if you'd like to add visuals or voiceover notes. Click here to watch more.